Hello, welcome to Painting with Acrylics and the Ocean. I'm Ashley Krieger, a full-time traveler, artist, and the teacher behind 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗪𝗡𝗏, a place where you can learn to paint with acrylics and, most importantly, relax while you get creative. Today we're going to dive right into what you need to get started with acrylic painting, plus I'm going to give you my best and easiest solution to acrylics fast dry time. Let's start by exploring some simple techniques as we paint a beautiful underwater ocean scene together. We're just going to need a few simple supplies to get started with acrylics. I like to keep things simple to begin with. You're going to need some acrylic paints. Let's look at this page from my acrylic painting guide for beginners. Here you can see that there are three types of acrylics. There are fluid acrylics, soft body acrylics, and heavy body acrylics. Fluid paints act like an ink, soft body will dry level, and heavy body lets you add texture. You can either use a soft body or a heavy body acrylic paint to do these tutorials with me. I recommend getting a set of acrylic paints. The larger the set, the less mixing you have to do. I'm going to put these over here because now the next thing you need is a surface to paint on. I recommend starting with canvas panels. You can use any rectangular size, but I like the 8 by 10 inch size. I have a few favorites that I like to use for brushes. I have my flat brushes, which is a 1.5 inch. This is called a round brush. It has a pointy tip, and I like to have a size 8. The smaller ones are called detail brushes, and I like to have a 0 or a 1. Of course, you can get a set of brushes, and you can have all different kinds. Brushes have certain names, and they create different brush strokes. We're going to learn about some of my favorite brushes in this tutorial. I like to keep it simple because there are so many options you can get overwhelmed by the amount of brushes, so let's just stick with these 4 brushes. Then all you need is some water. We'll use it to thin down the paint when we need to and to wash our brushes. You'll also want to have a paper towel. Okay, so from this set I'm only going to use a few colors. I'm going to add those colors to my palette here. This is the easiest and my most favorite solution to keeping your paints from drying too fast. You want to have some kind of container, put a couple layers of wet paper towels on the bottom, and wet copy paper on the top. Your container needs to have a lid, and then when you're not using your paints, you just put the lid on. It'll keep your paints from drying out, and you can keep them in this for as long as a month. You put your paint on the top of the copy paper, and then whenever you go to paint, your paints will be wet instead of already drying out on a dry palette. This wet palette will keep your paints workable on your surface longer. So now let's add ultramarine blue to your palette. Add your primary yellow to your palette. This can be lemon or cadmium yellow. Now I'm going to grab the Prussian blue, it's a much darker blue, and my phthalo green and add those to my palette. For the yellow, I've added both a little bit of lemon yellow and a little bit of the cadmium yellow. I just want you to see the difference, but it doesn't matter which one you use. If you don't have phthalo green, you can mix your yellow with your blues. Now the last color besides my black and my white that I want is my raw sienna. You can see when I put down my paint that this is a heavy body paint because it maintains its shape. Then all you want is your white and your black on your palette, and that's going to help you lighten and darken colors. A palette knife is a handy tool for mixing colors. If you don't have one of these, an old plastic card will work or a plastic butter knife. To make the color for the sand, I'm adding a lot of white, a little bit of yellow, and some of my sienna color over here. Keep mixing that until you have this tan color, and then we're going to dull it down with a little bit of black. If you only have basic colors, you can use your yellow, your black, and your red to make this color as well. There's a reference photo that goes along with this lesson, and right below those are the colors that I use, so you can work towards matching those, but you don't have to get the colors exactly the way that I have them. The next color that I want to make is a teal. I'm just going to add a little bit of the phthalo green to my white. Add a little bit of the ultramarine blue. Now your palette is ready, so let's begin painting. Let's start by painting the water. We're going to grab our 1-inch wash brush, is what this is called, and then we're going to use our dark blue. Let's start with a line about 1/3 way up from our canvas, or 2/3 of a way down. Let's take that line across, and I want you to notice the drag of your paint. If you're having a hard time pulling that paint across, or it starts to skip sections, like you can see the white of the canvas underneath it. So I'm going to pull up right here, and notice how I'm pulling up, the paint runs out on the very edges of pulling up. And you can see the white of the canvas, little specks of the white. That means I need to add more paint to my brush. I don't want to see the white of the canvas, so I'll have to keep going back for paint. I also want to have a good amount of coverage. Now when you add water to your brush, it will help with the drag, making your paint glide over the canvas. However, it will also make your paints more transparent, which means see-through. So on the edges of your canvas with this dark blue, you should come up just a little bit more than the middle. Let's add our wash brush to our water right now, and let's see how the paint changes with the water. I don't get the blue off my brush, but I dab the excess water off my brush onto my paper towel. And I will keep going back for water until I can drag this paint that I put down over into the center area. Notice how it's easier to drag the paint over, but it's also more transparent. So it's changed the color of this paint because you can see the white of the canvas underneath. If you, however, want to keep your paint thick, but you want to have a lighter blue, you need to add white to it. So let's go ahead and add white to this and see how it changes the color here. Let's pull up as we do that and grab some of this other blue and add it in. I want you to notice how I'm using my brush in a swirly motion right now. And I'm pretty much kind of scrubbing it in. I'm running out of water on my brush, and so the paint starts showing some of the white of the canvas underneath there, but if I scrub in the paint, then I can get rid of those white specks. And I can go back for my dark color to add dark in certain areas, and then I can add a lighter blue or white to my blue to make the lighter areas. So we're just going to focus on this dark blue, putting it down here, and then we can grab our medium blue, put it in between. I'm going in a swirly motion to get that right in, and then I can add white to the top area to lighten that color and move it around. And this way I don't have a transparent paint by adding water to my brush. Adding water to your brush can weaken your paint. So you don't want to add more than 25% of water to your acrylics because then it separates the binding and the pigments that are in the paint. So I'm going to bring the lighter blue up to the corners on both the left and right side, just like we did with the dark blue at the bottom of this ocean area. Okay, so this is a very loose painting, so it can be sloppy like this. It doesn't need to be smooth. In fact, we're going to use the edge of this brush to bring some of the medium color of the blue into the light and into the dark color with just some wispy lines. So this is what you can do. You can grab your smaller flat brush here, this is a 1/2 inch, and you can make these swirly lines like this with it. And then it kind of carves into the paint and it lifts off some of the paint. You can also drag one color into the other, so I can drag the dark blue up and put that on my brush and then put it in the lighter blue area. So you just do this all around, making sure that you go up on the right side and up on the left side in kind of this elongated U shape. Practice making these elongated swirly lines with the edge of the flat brush. And flat brushes are great for edges and making lines. If you struggle to get your medium color into your dark color and your dark color into your medium and light colors of blue, you can always add some of that color of paint that you want to add in to your brush and then add it wherever you want it to go. I'm just going to show you that I can add it right here if I want. But before we start adding color up there, we want to give it a layer of color underneath it. So I'm going to wash out my brush here and make sure that there's no blue on my brush. So I'll dab it also on my paper towel to make sure it's clean. Then I'm going to add some of the tan color to my brush, and just up here at the very top I'm going to go in a swirly motion, spreading that paint around. There's water on my brush, so notice that on your brush too, that it makes it easy to spread this color around. Let's wash that color out of our brush and dab it on our paper towel again. And let's add the pure white color to our brush. Make sure you don't have any blue on it. We're just going to add that color over the top, and we're going to mix those two colors in together to create a very light color. Then we're going to take that white color and we're going to move it into the lightest blue. Again, using kind of a swirly motion with the edge of our brush. Go back for paint whenever you feel like it's running out, and let's focus on pulling that color into the medium blue. Now you have blue on your brush, so you're just going to drag in the white and then let some of that blue drag into your white area and the white to drag into your medium blue area. And keep going back for paint whenever you start running out. And just play here with the movement of the paint. Notice how you can pull one side of the paint into the other. And you know, when acrylics dry fast, that makes it really, really hard. But since we're using this Stay Wet palette and our paints are staying wet on the palette and they're not drying already, it makes it so much easier to do this. You can even add in that light green color in places where you want it. So let's just wipe off our brush. We don't have to wash it out. Let's just add a little bit of that light green color to it and start putting it in between the blue and the white color. And again, watch my brush strokes. See how I'm forming lines and making movement by moving my brush in the movement I want to see on my painting. So here I want to see some stronger lines of this blue into my white, so I'll grab the right color and then I'll pull it in and make the shape that I want with my brush. My art lessons always emphasize creativity. You've probably noticed already that your painting looks different than my painting, and that's okay. That's what we want to see. This is a very loose and playful painting, and so really you can't go wrong with it. You're just trying to kind of copy the idea of what I'm doing here, which is pulling the blue into the white and the white area into the lighter blue, and then we pull that dark blue from the bottom into the medium blue. Instead of blending, this is how we're getting the look of this water here. If we wanted to blend this and make this all nice and smooth, we would use a completely different brush stroke. We would go back and forth over the same area several times, and that's not what we're doing. Okay, so let's grab our round brush and see the different shapes it'll make. So round brushes are great for inconsistent lines. So here, let's grab a little bit of that darker blue-green here. I just want to have a medium tone of these two colors. And we're going to put that in the medium blue area. And let's just make some swirly marks with that. How different are these swirly marks than the marks that we made with our flat brush? Probably not that different, right? But you can see that the point at the end allows you to get a point at the very beginning of your mark. So you can use that end to make little dots, and you can use that pointy end to drag the paint over and push down on the brush and get a thicker line in areas, and then lift off of the brush and get a tiny little line. So let's practice that. Let's practice doing some dots here with some white just underneath the white area of our painting. When we push down a little bit more, we get more of a blob look. Okay, so let's take that paint off of our brush, just wipe it on your paper towel, and let's grab the darker blue. On the top right corner, let's make a squiggly line here. So to do that, you are going to push down in the thicker areas and lift up on your brush when you want it to start being thinner. So let's practice that. Let's just push here on our brush. We ran out of paint, so we're getting a lighter blue color. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush, dab it on my paper towel, grab some more blue, and then start doing it on the left side here. And I can get really thin lines when I'm barely pushing on my brush. So see the difference between the inconsistent lines on the upper right and those types of lines. So I'm going to add just a little bit of white right there. I'm just playing around now, so you can play too. We can always come back in later and change things and tweak things so that we like our painting more. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to play around a little bit more, and then I'll take you to the next step. In this step, we're going to paint the sandy area at the bottom of our canvas. So let's grab our tan and we're just going to make this bottom right corner area all tan. So just spread it in. This brush that I'm using is the 1/2 inch flat brush. I call them a flat brush, even though the shorter hairs will be considered a bright brush, and the longer ones that have the flat tops are considered the flat brush. So now I'm going to take that light green color and I'm going to go above the tan color with that and fill in that area. And I can pull some of the colors together, so I can create lines here and push the tan color into the green color and the green color into the tan color, starting to make these lines that are going to be in the sand. One of the differences that I see in the bright versus the flat brush is that the smaller or the shorter the bristles are, the more control you have. So here I'm going to create this line right here. Having the flat top helps create a straight line. And if you have shorter bristles on your brush, then it'll give you more control over that line. So for smaller paintings and detailed work, I prefer the shorter bristles. And then for bigger work that I'm trying to loosen up my brush strokes, I'll use the flat top brushes with the longer bristles. Okay, so here I grab some of the darker tan and I'm just dragging in some very elongated lines going at a diagonal from the bottom left corner. And I'm focusing on this tan area, and then I'll add a little bit in the green area. And this is the shadow area of the sand. The water moving over the sand makes shapes in the sand like this. It doesn't just have a smooth bottom. It actually has these really elongated rivets. So we want to create that same texture in our painting. So I didn't clean my brush, I'm just adding some dark blue to it. And I'm going to add some of this dark blue to the back area. So this is a color choice here because as things go back into the distance, especially in water, those colors start to cool down. Okay, so we're actually going to pull in the dark colors in the background area, and the warm colors come forward because we are seeing the sunshine hitting that water closer to us. So this gives us depth. So let's focus on creating some inconsistent lines back here, some swirly motions at a diagonal. You can kind of see how I pull, and then I pull to one side and then I go back quickly to the other side, kind of creating some swirls in some areas because the water just creates this inconsistent look into the sand. It's not a perfectionist thing. I mean, you can slow down and make perfect lines, but it's not going to look like nature as much. It's going to look more like a cartoon. So I like to just keep it loose and playful, and that will give it a loose look. Notice also how I'm not blending a lot. I'm not going over an area several times. That's what blending is going over an area several times, and it just mixes those colors in with each other. I'm basically mixing on my palette whatever color I want, and then I put it on my painting. So now I have this lighter blue color. I'm adding some of that in there, and I will add some of that in this sand color because, again, some of that blue from the ocean or the shadow areas will be in the foreground, or what we're seeing first. That's called the foreground. Okay, so we're creating the illusion of space here. And so let's just bring in a little bit of that color as we pull it forward, and it just cools this painting down. Okay, and it starts making the shadows look more like a blue shadow versus the darker sand color. I'm going to just add a little bit into this corner all the way down to the right. And the great thing about acrylics is that you can at any time not do what I'm doing based on your own personal preferences. You can also fix anything you don't like because acrylics are so easy to just go over or to change it by lifting off the paint. Nothing is final here, so let's just play around with this and practice our brush strokes and pulling color around. Again, pause the video if you'd like to play more, and then I will show you the next step. In this step, we're going to add additional layers, adjust some colors, and soften our painting. So I'm going to get a more finished look when I do this. So I'm just going to come in with more of the dark paint and adjust this color right here and kind of soften some of the areas that I added a little bit more of the blue, middle blue color to, and I don't want it to be there. I'm also going to come in with just a little bit of that dark blue on my brush and drag that paint around and create some more swirlies up here. Adding more details into your water will start switching this painting into a more realistic painting. You can choose how many details you want to add based on your personal preferences. I'm softening this line by going over it more than once. This is the line between the sand and the ocean water. I can also soften any of my swirly lines in my ocean water by doing the same thing. Now I'm going to soften these lines in the sand by gently going over them, doing the same thing, kind of blending those colors together, the swirling motion, just trying to soften them a little bit, make them less harsh and smoother. Going over something more than once helps to smooth it out. Which brings us to the very last step in this tutorial, which are the final details, which rely on your personal preferences. So you can take this painting whichever way you want to go. I'm going to show you some of my final details. So I'm making sure I have a dry brush here because here we have some dry paint and I'm going to use a dry brush technique. This is going to help me soften some lines and then we'll add rays in the painting. So let's see. Let's soften this line back here. I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of paint to my brush and just go across this line a little bit more. If you like this look, then go ahead and add it. If you don't need to do this. This is all about personal preferences. So I'm also going to add a little bit more of these dark lines back here. Again, a personal preference. It was fine just the way it was. It's just something that I want to change in my painting, and you can do that if you want to as well. So we're just adjusting colors to our preferences, basically. I've also decided I want to bring my line down here up a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit of this line, not a consistent line all the way across, just a little bit less on the right side. If you like where your line is, don't make any changes, but if you do want to change it, go ahead and change it along with me. With some very watered down blue paint over here on the left side, I'm going to cover some of the sandy area. This technique is called glazing. It makes it so that you can see the colors underneath and also the shapes that you've already put down. The paint underneath needs to be dry before you can glaze over an area, and it just helps to adjust the colors slightly. You could do this with your tan and you can do this with your blue. So you can also add in more details if you wish. One of the details I want to add is some light rays coming through the water. So I have a dry brush here. If your light paint is not dry, then you can go ahead and drag it at an angle here. You can also add just a tiny bit of the lighter blue to your brush, and it will also create just a tiny change in color so that you can have light rays. So let's do that. I'm going to add this lighter bluish green to my brush. Then I can make that line go further down into the dark. I can paint as many rays as I want, so here I'm going to just add a little bit, and this time instead of an angle on my brush, I'm just going to go down at a slight angle. So it kind of just starts to get bigger down here on the bottom, or more separated from the other line. So let's just add a little bit more to my brush, and let's make another one. I'm going to go straight down. I have a little bit too much coverage, and so I'm just going to add a little bit of the darker blue to my paintbrush here. And then pull all the way straight down. So it's kind of like a star shape with these lines here. And I'm going to go as low as I want, maybe down all the way to the sand, cover the dark area. And this again is a personal preference. I'm also going to soften by going over the area just a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more to my brush. Get this middle tone color, and I'm going to create another line. This one will be a little bit more on the dry brush because I will drag that color further down and I'm going to take some of the color off. Now I'm going to start angling the line towards the right more at the bottom. Grab a little bit more color if I want more coverage right here, and then just keep pulling down. I can also take that line past where the sand and the ocean meet that line. We'll kind of break up that line. I like how it does that, and if you like that as well, you can do it too. If you want to add this detail, go ahead and you can add as many lines like this as you would like. And go ahead and keep adding in your personal preferences. You could even add more, like fish, turtles, and people swimming, whatever you want to do to finish up your painting. Painting is all about being creative, and I'm so happy that you came to create with me today and have some time for yourself to relax. I look forward to teaching you more, and I'll see you in the next lesson.